and my other brother was more down with the funk. And so I would steal Earth, Wind & Fire, Ohio Players, and these kind of things from this brother, my older brother. So I'd collect all the records and go, and when he was gone, I would get in there and get the old Koss headphones on my head and just dig in the Queen. And
when Jason Newsted suddenly announced his departure from Metallica in January 2001, the news hit fans like a thunderclap. The official statement attributed his exit to private and personal reasons, along with a vague mention of physical damage sustained over years of performing. But that carefully worded explanation concealed a deeper, more painful truth. Behind the scenes, Newsted had reached an emotional and creative breaking point. The very band that had propelled him to worldwide fame had also slowly, steadily, and perhaps unintentionally pushed him into the margins. His involvement with a side project called Echobrain, a separate musical outlet that allowed him to express ideas that didn't fit within Metallica's creative mold, would spark a conflict that laid bare long-standing fractures within the band. And when it came to a head, it wasn't just a disagreement over side projects. It was about identity, legacy, loyalty, and control. In the years since, Lars Ulrich has opened up about that volatile moment in the band's history, offering rare insight into what really happened and how close Metallica came to imploding under the weight of its own internal pressures to truly understand the emotional tension that culminated in the Echobrain standoff. We have to look back at the moment Jason Newsted entered the band. In 1986, he wasn't just filling a vacancy, he was stepping into a sacred space left behind by the late Cliff Burton, Metallica's beloved bassist who tragically died in a tour bus accident. Burton had been more than a bandmate. He was a cornerstone of the group's identity and a guiding force in their sound and spirit. Newsted, though musically skilled and fiercely loyal, quickly found himself on the receiving end of unspoken grief and resentment. The band was still raw, still mourning, and still angry at a universe that had ripped away someone irreplaceable. Jason became the symbolic stand-in for that loss, and from the very beginning, he was treated as an outsider. His position wasn't just about filling a role, it was about walking in a ghost's footsteps. Even as he gave everything he had on stage and in the studio, he was rarely allowed a seat at the creative table. The notorious ... and Justice for All album from 1988, where his bass parts were virtually erased in the final mix, became a harsh metaphor for his role in the band. Present, but barely heard. Lars Ulrich would later admit they were still emotionally wrecked over Cliff's death, and that Newsted had been caught in the fallout, essentially punished for being the one who had to carry the torch. It set the tone for a strained dynamic that would last for the next 15 years. Despite the emotional toll, Newsted soldiered on with unwavering dedication, pouring his energy into Metallica's relentless touring schedule and album cycles. But beneath the surface, creative hunger was building, one that had no room to grow within Metallica's tightly controlled structure. By the late 1990s, it became clear to Jason that his artistic vision was being suffocated, and Lars Ulrich were the dominant forces behind Metallica's songwriting and direction. Jason found himself sidelined. His musical ideas, no matter how thoughtful or passionate, rarely made it to the final product. Seeking a creative outlet that could exist outside the rigidity of Metallica's framework, he began working with other musicians, specifically guitarist Dylan Donkin and drummer Brian Sagrafina, a new project that would come to be known as Echobrain. This wasn't just a hobby or a distraction. It was a heartfelt expression of a different side of Newsted's artistry.
Echobrain's sound leaned more toward melodic, alternative rock with progressive undertones, far from Metallica's
aggressive thrash. At first, he thought it could coexist peacefully with his role in Metallica. He even shared the music with Hetfield in hopes of receiving support. But as the project started to attract real industry interest, including from Metallica's own label, things changed. Suddenly, Echobrain wasn't seen as a harmless side gig. It was seen as competition, or worse, betrayal. The situation escalated quickly. What began as quiet discomfort among his bandmates transformed into an outright confrontation. During a tense meeting with management present, James Hetfield delivered a stark message to Jason. His involvement with Echobrain was not compatible with his future in Metallica. It was a clear ultimatum: choose the band or choose the side project. As Newsted later recalled, James said point blank that continuing with Echobrain would damage Metallica, and that if Jason insisted on moving forward with it, his time in the band would be over. It was a moment that encapsulated years of tension, years of creative suffocation, years of being treated like a second-class member, years of swallowing disappointment in service of the greater machine. For Jason, it was heartbreaking. He had always believed his loyalty would eventually earn him the space to grow. But instead, he was forced to decide between staying in a band that didn't value his voice or stepping into the unknown with his own music. What hurt even more was that Metallica's longtime management, Q Prime, sided with Hetfield and Ulrich. Jason had hoped they'd support both projects, or at least help find a compromise. But no such compromise came. In the end, faced with a no-win scenario, Jason Newsted walked away from Metallica not out of spite, but out of necessity. And for the band he left behind, it marked the beginning of one of their darkest, most uncertain eras in the immediate aftermath of Newsted's departure. Metallica descended into chaos. Hetfield soon entered rehab, and the band's next album, Saint Anger, would be shaped by a storm of personal demons, creative clashes, and psychological breakdowns. Much of this internal unraveling was documented in the film Some Kind of Monster, which captured the raw dysfunction of a band struggling to hold itself together. In those therapy sessions, awkward, tense, and sometimes painfully, honest Lars Ulrich began to confront what had driven Jason away. He admitted to feelings of control, of needing to micromanage every aspect of Metallica's identity, how that rigidity had made it impossible for someone like Newsted to thrive. It was a moment of painful growth, though Ulrich never publicly issued a full apology for the Echobrain standoff. His later interviews and reflections have shown more understanding, even remorse. He's acknowledged that they were all in a fragile place, holding too tightly to the structure they'd built, afraid that letting anyone branch out would threaten the band's survival. For Newsted, though, there were no regrets. Echobrain released an album in 2002, and though it received mixed reviews, Jason stood by it. He later played with Voivod, joined Ozzy Osbourne's band for Ozfest, and even launched a solo project under his own name. In a 2013 interview, he said flatly, "I've never regretted leaving Metallica. It was the right thing for everyone. Time, as it often does, has healed some of the wounds." Newsted reunited with Metallica for their 2009 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction and appeared at anniversary shows in the years that followed. The pain may never fully disappear, but there's now room for respect, understanding, and maybe even peace between artists who once found themselves on opposite sides of an impossible choice.